So I've decided to make a second video that kind of goes over a lot of the common core questions that people ask me on a regular basis. And if this is the first time seeing me, well, I was married for 25 years and my wife passed away from alcohol use disorder a little over 4.5 years ago. One of the big questions I get is, do you drink? Which is fairly annoying because when someone asks that, they don't realize they don't have an understanding of the connotation behind it, and they don't understand that alcohol use disorder has very little to do with the actual alcohol. And again, I've gone over this, but it has to do with repressed emotions, depression, anxiety, stress, hereditary issues, family culture, peer pressure. Could be some kind of dual element, bipolar, PTSD, ADHD. There's just a plethora of things, stress that creates someone to go down the road and create a habit, and then to get an addiction that develops into a mental health issue. I mean, to ask, when someone asks me if I drink, I'm not a teetotaler, but alcohol is not part of my life. I might have a bourbon once a month. I mean, it's not an issue. And the thing is, alcohol has nothing to do with me. My wife always drank by herself. It was something that she did. It was never something that we did together. I hope that kind of puts that to rest. I hope that makes an understanding to it. I don't have any of those kind of emotions. I didn't have the same background as my wife. People, when they come together into a marriage, often bring baggage, certain baggage into that marriage. And unless you are cognizant of that person's history and are aware of that person's history, you're not going to find out until later on. And that's a big part of the story. Another question I get a lot is, how was she able to drive? Didn't she lose her license? She had 4 DUIs. Did she have a license? Was she insurable? Anything like that? No, she had a revoked license. She did not have a license. She was uninsurable after probably the second DUI. I mean, the insurance was ridiculous. She drove around without a license, without insurance, and I also did not register her car. She was driving around unlicensed, uninsured, in an unregistered car, and half the time she had warrants. I mean, she was a walking billboard to get pulled over, and on top of that, half the time she was inebriated. Eventually, I ended up taking the battery out of the car. She actually didn't drive probably the last 18 months to 2 years, and we had a BMW X5. It literally sat in the garage. And if I wanted it, I had to put the battery in it. If I needed to move something big or go to Home Depot, I had to put the battery back in the car and use it. Otherwise, it was dead. And that's the extent. And I was actually paying for, I think, $170 a month for a breathalyzer, court-ordered breathalyzer, so that she couldn't drive the car, or if she couldn't drive it inebriated. Well, I took the battery out of it, so she couldn't drive it at all, because she would actually get one of her friends to come over and breathe into it, or try to get our son to breathe into it. This is the kind of insanity that family has to go through. And unless a person has experienced living with an alcoholic or with alcohol use disorder in their family, they don't know all these nuances that families go through. And then I always get, of course, I get the divorce question. Why didn't you just leave her? Why didn't you just divorce her? All this kind of woulda, shoulda, coulda stuff. Unless you've been in that situation, you can't make those kind of comments. It's really ridiculous. Unfortunately, near the end, and if I had it to do over, if I had to look back, I probably would have right around 2015. And if you follow me, my wife had a very serious binge drinking episode in New York when my mother passed away, and it just became this huge drama-filled thing when my mother passed away. I probably should have, I was really at the end there, and emotionally that was kind of the end of it for ourselves. It was about 4.5 years before she passed away. But again, you can't know that. I think the last few years really were all about self-preservation, making sure she didn't harm herself or anybody else, and it became a very stressful and a very impossible situation for myself to be in. You can't just take your wife and go to a bus station and drop her off at the at the park bench. It doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. And you have to protect her, and you got to protect yourself. It's a very complicated thing. People say, "Oh, you can just walk away." Well, not really, because you have a fiduciary, and you have a responsibility to that person to some degree. And eventually that's what I was setting up. I mean, it was setting up her last rehab that she went into. She was going to go into a sober living facility for a year, and at that point, I was in the process of legal separation and self-preservation. Unfortunately, she fell down a flight of stairs and succumbed to the disease ultimately, which probably all it did was accelerate what would have happened probably anyways. But as a spouse, one other thing I need to say. As both a spouse or as a family member, number one, you're not a police officer, you're not their prison guard, you're not their psychiatrist, you're not their drug and alcohol counselor. You are their spouse, you're their partner. Okay, you're not responsible for their actions. You can take care of yourself. That's what you can do. You're not responsible for them. You cannot want something more for the other person than they want it for themselves. You cannot make somebody do something or become something that they don't want for themselves. And that is the deepest thing I hope you take from this video, and I hope that makes sense. And again, the memoir, Amanda, A Cautionary Tale of Alcoholism, is now out. It's live on the PayPal link. You can go to my Linktree, you go to the website, click it right there, and the PayPal link is right there. This is actually going to be released on Amazon on 12/12 of 2024, so just in a matter of a couple days, or when you're watching this, it might already be out. But you can pre-order right now. They're all going to go out this week. I would suggest pre-ordering on my website before Thursday, because then they'll have a big count, and it goes out quicker if you do it earlier. And again, thanks for listening. We also I go live Monday through Friday, right around 6 o'clock Pacific time, Monday through Friday, 9 o'clock Eastern time, and we have the Facebook group called There's an Alcoholic in the Family. Thanks so much for listening.